Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Jeff Brohm, the Louisville Cardinals, continuing to stay aggressive in the transfer portal, landing not one, but two commitments Friday night. Going to recap the two commitments in JaCorey Brooks and Corey Thornton, then talk about a massive visitor list for the Louisville Cardinals this weekend in the transfer portal as well. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and a special shout out to the Louisville Cardinal fans. This has been a program that we've been recapping the transfer portal, talked a bunch about them in the 2023 season. The amount of support you guys have shown the boys means a lot. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, you want to support the fellas, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, going to kick this one off to you. Let's talk about commitment number one. JaCorey Brooks, former five-star wide receiver coming over from Alabama. I know you have some takes on him. Let's hear it.
I mean, this is the type of guy I think Louisville needs to continue to kind of bring in through their program and make this more of a two-dimensional offense, because you've seen JaCorey Brooks play really good football. Obviously, his junior year really didn't work out so well for him or probably what he thought it was going to be. But you go back to that sophomore year, especially towards the end of that season, making a lot of big plays, being able to stretch the field and be more of that vertical threat. And again, you kind of look at what Louisville needs to do if they're going to take that jump and go beat a Florida State or beat those competitive teams. They need to be a little more two-dimensional and need to be able to hit the ball all over the field, not just kind of short intermediate routes that Jack Plummer was kind of more comfortable with.
Yeah, and I feel like the passing attack and when it wasn't there, I feel like that was definitely largely resolved. Jack Plummer just not having that high upside. He was a guy that Jeff Brohm, and again, not trying to drag Jack Plummer, he capped that offense in terms of what Jeff Brohm could call that offense and where they could go with the football. They had to cater around him. I think a guy like Tyler Shuck opens up this offense in a meaningful way. And a guy like JaCorey Brooks, I mean, there was a reason he was a five-star coming out of high school. There was a reason that 6 months ago during the summer, you saw him in NFL mock drafts in the first round. This is a guy that has a ton of talent, size, athleticism. He brings it all to the table. And this is the best example of transfer portal usage, right? This is a guy that had a really good second year of college football, needed to change of scenery after year three. Hey, I can't think of a better offense. If you want to resurrect your wide receiving, like you want to get back to form, then come to this Jeff Brohm offense. JaCorey Brooks, a massive, massive pickup for the Cardinals. Next guy I want to talk about, and this is JaCorey Brooks being the former five-star wide receiver is going to get a lot of the attention, and rightfully so. He's an awesome wide receiver. This was a sneaky, really good pickup for Louisville. Was buzzing the film on Corey Thornton this morning. 38 game starter. He's broken up 24 passes in his career, has 4 interceptions. So the experience, the productivity, it's all there. The physical trait, 6'1", 190, really smooth mover. That's there. You look at his 2023 season, 50 targets faced, only gave up 25 catches, 11 forced incompletions. I mean, there's not many better cornerbacks at the Power 5 level than Corey Thornton. And yes, JaCorey Brooks was getting the big headlines last night. Corey Thornton, a massive addition to this Louisville defense.
Yeah, and this was a big ad because they got some cornerbacks who have decisions to make. Brownlee's got to make a decision. Quincy Riley's got to make one. Storm Duck's got to make one. So they have a lot of talent in that room. They have a lot of questions kind of, I think, surrounding what those guys are going to do. But to bring in that a kind of a plug and play number one guy, I think is massive for them.
This is a guy that you would feel comfortable starting week 1 in the 2024 year. He is just been, and even at the Big 12 level. So the questions that you had about, can he make the jump from the Group of 5 to Power 5? No, UCF was Power 5 Big 12 football, and he played phenomenal in 2023, going up against some really quality wide receivers. Really excited about that addition. Now, we talked about Louisville and bringing in a ton of guys. Dill, I know you want to talk about a specific addition that we haven't gotten a chance to talk about. Mark Redmond coming over from San Diego State. Let's hear a little bit of your takes on him.
Well, I think if you watch that Miami game, you kind of see the potential they have to use tight ends in the Jeff Brohm offense, and you saw how he wanted to use them. But I think you also saw a level you weren't really looking at NFL tight ends on that roster last year. You bring in a guy like Mark Redmond, who, at least for what we think he might kind of have more of that upside potential. Obviously, a 4-star tight end recruit out of the portal. And that's huge just because, again, you kind of look at what Jeff Brohm's done with tight ends in his past. He's had some really good ones, Payne Durham, Miller from Purdue. They've been able to use that position really effectively. I just don't think they had that elite guy. And now with Mark Redmond, at least you think you might have that guy. And I think that should really kind of allow Jeff Brohm to open some things up.
For me, it's the same conversation. And what excites you most if you're a Louisville fan, we said this heading into the year, this is by far the most talented wide receiver, pass catcher skill group that we've ever seen Jeff Brohm have. And we've seen him put together some of the more dynamic passing attacks that we've seen at the college football level back at Purdue. And he has so much talent in the wide receiver room, in the tight end room, in the running back room now to work with. And that now you bring in Tyler Shuck. I don't think we got to fully appreciate how good these wide receivers were with Jack Plummer playing. And this is the last time I'll bring this up. With Tyler Shuck, I think this offense opens up massively in terms of seeing what these pass catchers can do. So I totally agree with that. And it doesn't even sound like they're done, Dill. Like Colin Lacy, I'll start with Colin Lacy, one of my favorite wide receivers available in the portal in kind of similar trajectory to a guy like Jamari Thrash last year. I mean, you're getting one of the more productive group of 5 wide receivers potentially to make a jump up. Now he's visiting Louisville this weekend. You're battling out Texas A&M for his commitment. 91 catches for 1,300 yards last year. Some of the things I love most about his game, he's a 3-level wide receiver. Really good short and intermediate. And we're in terms of working yards after the catch, when he's very dangerous with the football in his hands, but he's a guy that can attack the deeper third, create separation down the field. He's a box checker. And I think this would be, I mean, you already have JaCorey Brooks coming in, Colin Lacy. You talk about how talented this wide receiver room might be in 2024. Colin Lacy would do massive things for this Louisville wide receiver room.
And there's like an element of you're kind of excited to see what Jeff Brohm can do with that because you've never seen it, period. I mean, they never had big-time weapons at Purdue. Like, they'd have their guys, a David Bell, a Rondell Moore, and they'd use them really effectively, and he'd allow them to kind of shine. But he's never had this, like, bench of talent, if you will, where it's really deep, and they have a lot of different guys with complementary skill sets.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking forward to, is seeing, like, man, how good can Jeff Brohm be? Because he's carved out some really good offenses with, like, not a lot of tools in the shed, if you will. With this type of, like, talent, if they can bring in a couple more of these wideouts with this type of talent, yeah, they're going to be.
I think you make such a good point in terms of, like, a lot of these wide receivers just can do different things. I don't think people focus on that enough. Is like a wide receiver room, you're kind of like trying to build a basketball team. Like, you want some guys that can do different things, your rebounders, your passers, your shooters. You want wide receivers who can thrive in different scenarios, right? Working down the field, working after the catch, creating separation. I think Louisville is doing a nice job building a pass catcher group that has a lot of different skill sets and things that they can do. Really excited about that. Now, another position that we're talking about, especially with the news, Jawar Jordan going to the NFL draft, and shout out Jawar Jordan, blast to watch. Really hope he has a good NFL career. Got to get some depth at the running back room, right? We're not sure what's going on with Isaac Guerendo. Don Cheney is one of my favorite running backs in this portal class, and not necessarily because what he's done as a college football player yet, but what he can be. And this guy was a top 100 commit coming out of high school, played for the Miami Hurricanes, flashed as a true freshman, and then just had his 2 back-to-back season-ending injuries. And you look at last year, he started getting back to form, right? 473 rushing yards, 270 of those coming after contact, thick lower half, has the ability to make people miss in space, and kind of an all-purpose running back that I think would kind of take over where Jawar Jordan left off in this running back room.
Yeah, and that'll still be a big thing. As much as we're talking about passing attack, I still think you want to be able to run the football. You want to be two-dimensional. Every good team that we've really seen offensively has been able to do it. So I think you have a pretty nice offensive line coming back. Obviously, adding Mendoza out of the portal was huge because you did have a couple tackles to replace. But you have a good set of interior guys who I think you can be pretty confident in. And then it will be about landing that one other big running back, especially if Isaac Guerendo isn't going to stay. But either way, I still think you want to build that depth like you were mentioning through. So it will be big to, I think, land one more back who you can kind of depend on.
You mentioned build depth at the running back position. Jaylen Lucas. This is a guy that, as a Big Ten fan, Coach, I'll tell you this. There's a reason Coach Brohm's going after Jaylen Lucas, because he saw what Jaylen Lucas can do at Indiana. This is one of the more special football players in the transfer portal. And he's a guy that, again, if Louisville fans are familiar with what Jeff Brohm did at Purdue, a guy like Rondell Moore, he's not necessarily a running back that's going to take 25 carries a game. He doesn't have that frame. He doesn't have that size to do so. When he has the football in space, he's one of the more electric playmakers in all of college football. And you see it with the special teams. I mean, he has 3 kick and punt returns for touchdowns in his career. This is a guy that you want to get in space, whether it's screens, whether it's swing passes, whether it's end arounds. It's one of those, we just talked about it, like tools in the tool shed. And Jaylen Lucas would be that special tool that when you need a big play, when you want to dial something up, Jaylen Lucas can make it happen. Would be really excited to see a guy, excuse me, like Jaylen Lucas playing in this Jeff Brohm offense.
Yeah, and then if Brohm can do anything like what he was able to do with Rondell Moore and what he made him and how I don't think people like on the national stage realize how dominant he was. I mean, he literally single-handedly beat an Ohio State team in the year. He was like, that's how good he was. I haven't seen a non-quarterback position be as impactful as I've seen as what he did in that one game. So you're right. You want to see him bring in these kind of more dynamic, unique athletes, and Jaylen Lucas kind of fits that bill. So you kind of bring in some of that into this program. That's like what would get me excited.
And Jeff Brohm knows how to use these guys. And like the most frustrating thing, not to get into like NFL football here, Rondell Moore going to the NFL, they don't know how to use him. And so the productivity is not there. Jeff Brohm knows how to use these kind of guys and get them in space and get them into the game plan. People don't talk enough about how good Jeff Brohm is as a play caller and as an offensive like scheme guy. He knows how to use these guys and get the football to them in space. Jaylen Lucas would be one of those guys that, again, maybe flies a little under the radar in terms of transfer portal additions. You probably are going to see him making some game-changing plays if he ends up winding up committing to Louisville. Last guy I want to talk about, we've been talking a lot of offense, and they'll possibly, like the biggest offseason move Louisville has made is keeping a guy like Ashton Gillotte coming back for another year at Louisville. As much as we talk about the offense and Jeff Brohm and kind of scheming up that offense, the reason Louisville had so much success was that defense, specifically
that front seven, especially
in the front seven, was absolutely dominant. And you got a guy like Ashton Gillotte coming back, potentially adding a defensive lineman like Aeneas Peebles could be massive for this Cardinals team.
Well, in my thinking is like they already have a pretty solid unit up through that middle of that defense.
Oh, yeah.
But that's a unit I think you want to be deep because you look at how athletic they play, how much expectation there is to make plays. It's not just like sitting on doubles and trying to hold the line. It's they want you making tackles. They want you getting sacks. And that's what their defensive tackles did. And that's a high energy output kind of style of play when you have that much pass rushing responsibility. So you want to build that depth up through that middle and adding a guy like Aeneas Peebles who plays that way. He's a productive player. He gets tackles. He gets sacks. He isn't that traditional like run stuffing D tackle whose job is not to make plays. He's a playmaker, and that's what Louisville kind of looks like they expect out of that defensive line position.
I was going to say you're describing Aeneas Peebles. He's not a space eater guy. 6'1", 285. He's a little bit undersized. He wins with twitch. He wins with his hands. And this is a guy that from that interior of the defensive line, 8.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. There's a reason that he's one of the more coveted defensive linemen in the transfer portal because he lives behind the line of scrimmage. He gives you a ton of juice in terms of rushing the passer. And you look at Louisville and what their recipe was for having a great defense was, hey, we're going to stop the run on first and second down, and we're going to get after you in those third and long situations. Aeneas Peebles certainly fits with what Louisville wants to do on the defensive side of the football. Massive potential weekend for the Cardinals. We outlined some of the visitors that we like the most at Louisville this weekend. I'm sure we'll have some updates coming early next week in terms of maybe some potential commitments. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.